Welcome to Low Key Classic Movies. Today we're talking about 65, starring Adam Driver. Now, 65 came out in theaters in 2023, I think January, February timeframe. I saw the trailers, I wasn't particularly interested, but it's out on Netflix and it's only 90 minutes long, so I figured, how bad could it be? Unfortunately, it's not that great. And in today's video, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I liked and didn't like about it, but then I want to do a deep dive into the story structure and what I thought were a couple mistakes that kept it from being a pretty good movie. So for this first part of the video, I'm not going to do too many spoilers. I'm going to talk mostly about what's in the trailer and the general nature of the movie and what I liked and didn't like about it. And then when I get to the second part, when I talk about story structure and what I thought they could have done to improve the movie, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what happened. Well, actually, it's pretty spoilerific. So if you hear what I have to say and think, oh, I want to see it, go ahead and leave after the first part, and then you can come back again later and hear what I had to say about what I thought should have been different about the movie. So if you saw the trailer, the movie's basically about a character who's a spaceship captain and he's flying some vehicle. And the trailer was not very clear why he's flying the ship. They explain it a little bit more in the movie, obviously, but in the trailer, all they say he's flying some ship. It crash lands on a planet, and it turns out there are dinosaurs there, and you see the dinosaurs in the trailer. The first trailer, I think they only had the shadows. Then the second one, they show the giant roaring Tyrannosaurus Rex. So it's pretty clear it's dinosaurs, right? Now, the trailer, that doesn't do much else about it. It doesn't really explain what's going on. Adam Driver obviously looks like a human being because he is. But the movie doesn't explain, is this a time travel movie or what? Once you start watching the beginning of the movie, it's clear it's not a time travel movie. It just takes place like Star Wars a long time ago, though in our galaxy, obviously, and he crash lands on Earth. The other thing I'll go ahead and tell you about the story is, obviously, he picks up a second person, like a little girl that he is with, ends up with him on his journey to try to survive the planet and ultimately escape. The other thing I'll mention to you about the setup is the movie starts with him kind of talking to his family. He has a wife and a daughter who has some kind of unspecified illness. And unfortunately, in this civilization, this ancient alien civilization, they have interstellar travel, but apparently not universal health care. So he has to take a 2-year trip as a pilot, fly this 2-year flight in order for his daughter to get the treatment she needs. So that's the initial kind of motivation for him to leave his family to fly the ship. And so then it cuts to like the ship, and the ship is gets damaged by some meteorites or something, and then he has to take over it and try to do what he can, and they crash land. And that's how the movie opens. That's the first 15 minutes or so. So what did I like about the movie? So one thing that's important to the movie is the relationship between Adam Driver and his sick daughter. And the movie does a good job, I think almost overdoes it, in dealing with the relationship. It really makes you care about their relationship, which this guy is trying to survive on this planet. You obviously want him to be able to get back to his daughter. And the movie really, spends a lot of time on that. I think too much time, because the main problem with the movie is that the movie, despite the fact only 90 minutes long, it's essentially a survival kind of chase movie. I mean, he's in there, he's trying to survive. Once he's got the little girl with him in tow, they're trying to survive, trying to protect her, and they're going through this like dinosaur danger zone. That should be exciting, right? But it isn't really for the most part. It's a little bit in moments, but it came across to me, and of course this is all subjective, but for me it was kind of dull. The second act, which is a good section of the movie, is pretty dull, of him kind of getting from finding the girl to getting to the end of the second act where stuff happens that, again, don't want to reveal at this point. But that stretch that should be an exciting, compelling second act instead is kind of a trite one that I was just waiting for something. When's the big thing going to happen? Eventually it does. And another good thing about the movie is the third act is actually pretty good. Once it gets there, once they set everything up, the third act is very fun and exciting and ultimately satisfying conclusion to the film. It saves the film, to be honest, because looking at this film overall, I'd probably only give it a 3 or 4 out of 10, which is right on the borderline for me. A 4 out of 10 is, for me, means that I don't mind having seen it, not a waste of my time. 3 and lower are generally a waste of my time, unless they're so bad they're funny bad, like ones. Ones are kind of fun experiences because you realize pretty soon into them they're so terrible. It's a pleasant surprise. Like The Room is obviously probably the greatest 1 out of 10 movie ever made. It's so hilariously awful and poorly made, it kind of circles back and becomes a classic. But it's terrible. Like, as a real movie, a legit movie, it's terrible. This movie isn't that. This movie takes itself seriously, tries to establish real drama, real stakes, but unfortunately is a little bit dry in doing so. And until it gets to the end, I could see a lot of people walking out in this movie. This is one of those movies that I could see people saying, forget this. About 45 minutes, 50 minutes into it, no thanks, I'm good on this, and just leaving. They miss a good ending, but I could see it happening. So that reason, I think I'm gonna give it a 4, but it's barely a 4. This movie could have been a whole lot better, but they made some mistakes. This is the part where if you're thinking about going to see it and you might go see it, stop here, go watch it. I'm gonna talk a little more into detail about the plot now and the story and some turns the movie takes that are misplaced. So the basic story is of so spoiler alert. The basic gist of this movie is child replacement. We find out late in the movie that Adam Driver's character, daughter, who was sick and who was angry with him, ultimately died and he wasn't there. And so even though she understood why he left, right at the end when she knew she wasn't going to make it and her father wasn't there for her, she was angry with him and expressed that. Even though right after, I think she just said one more thing saying she still loved him tearfully. But she was upset with him, which is kind of can make you, as a father, hate yourself. And I'm a father myself, and that connected with me, which is part of the reason why I didn't hate the movie, even though I thought it was relatively poorly made. And the people who made it, I should have talked about this earlier. 65 is directed by what I would call novice directing team. And what were their names? In Scott Beck and Brian Woods. Now, Scott Beck and Brian Woods are screenwriting teams, which are pretty common. Directing teams not as common unless they're family members like the Wachowskis. But this is a screenwriting team who got their big credit writing that movie with the Everybody Has to Be Quiet. It's called A Quiet Place. That's right. A Quiet Place. They're the screenwriters for the original, not the sequel, the original A Quiet Place. And I think that got them a lot of juice in Hollywood, and they used that juice to make this movie. So I think the movie that the story that they broke was a good one. And so that's the gist of it. It's a child replacement. So his child dies. So when he finds that girl in the jungle, it means more to him than we know. The problem is, looking back at the movie, because you find this out towards the end, as I said, like into the second act, he like says to the girl, like, my daughter died. Like, I think he says it like literally at the end of the second act. After he's already done so much to save her and already, been on the brink of giving up multiple times. Then he finally says that. And we finally find that out. So he does that. And you're sitting there, you're thinking, I wish I had known that earlier because it gives so much more subtext to what happened in the movie. And looking back at it, I also think they underplayed what should have been a fairly depressive state when he wakes up in that asteroid storm. So he's in that ship, he's in the asteroid storm, and he's trying to survive. He's trying to pilot the ship. He should be pretty sad. Like I had to look back again to see really how Adam Driver plays it. But to me, he plays it like any pilot wakes up and the ship's in trouble, right? And then he gets down to the planet, he gets out, and he starts looking around. You don't get the feeling like this is a guy that doesn't really care if he lives or dies. And to me, that's the place the character should have been, knowing that he just found out maybe a month earlier that his daughter was dead. His daughter that he had taken that trip to save there was no one to go back to. It was his wife, but once you have a daughter, that's different. That's your life. That's your heart. And he doesn't have that to go back to. So that happens, and he can't go back to it. And you're thinking he should have at least played that heavier. And then when he finds the girl, he should be, oh man, this is my chance. This is like a second chance. This is like the universe has given me the opportunity to sit in the subconsciously. You're not thinking this, whatever. Oh, I got a replacement for my daughter. But that's what the movie's trying to do for him. That's what the universe is trying to do for him. And he acts kind of whatever, like, I'm not letting this person die because her unit's like failing, like her little freezing unit's failing. Like, I'm not going to let her die. And he really acts, aggressively to get her out of there. And then he's, trying to help her and stuff, and he's tutelage or whatever. But you're watching it, and you don't get the feeling again like there's not a big shift from before he finds her to after. And then also, you find out so late after so many close calls and situations with the dinosaurs, that happened, that you're like, wow, that's what the story is. I get it. Like, to me, at the latest you should find it out is the halfway point of the movie. About 50% of the movie, you should know the full stakes of the character, why they're doing what they're doing, and what the stakes are for them, for him and for her. And he lies to her about her parents being alive to help motivate her. I think her not being able to speak is kind of a cop out, because he almost can't really explain to her really what happened yet, because she doesn't speak the language. So he has no choice but to lie. And I think that was kind of a cop out for the writers to say, we don't want our character to look bad by too much. So, well, she can't speak. So all he can do is say, hey, parents, we're going to go to them to motivate her to go. But really, they shouldn't have done that. They should have done something. They should have maybe had her just be maybe a little younger. So he has to talk to her, but he makes a conscious choice to deceive her for her own safety, because maybe something happens that requires her and she almost gets herself killed for no reason because she's so sad about thinking her parents have died. So he has like, but instead he just kind of cop him out and say, oh, he can't speak, so he's just trying to say whatever he can, and they whitewash that whole situation with the girl. And even though, of course, at the end of the second act, he has to tell her the truth and reveal, and that part I get. The part about lying and then into the second act, that's, I think, is broken properly. But to me, if you do that differently, you raise the stakes. So the stakes are raised for more than the movie. Because as I said, one of the big problems of the movie is it's kind of dull in the middle of it. Like, okay, he's trying to live, so what else is he going to do? Now he's got a girl with him. He's trying to take care of her too, but you still think he's trying to get back to his daughter. So you have the wrong stakes. You don't understand what's happening. You think, oh, she's a tag along. Maybe he survives and she doesn't. Who knows? Whereas I think one reason why they did that too is I think that you probably realize it's a child replacement story if you say the daughter's dead earlier. Then it's more obvious what the ending is going to be. But the thing is, at the end of the second act, when they tell you, it's obvious what the ending is going to be. You know that she's going to survive. First of all, you always know she's going to survive. I'm not going to kill a little kid in this movie. The tone is not that, right? The question is whether or not he's going to live. Once you find out that's his replacement daughter, you know he's not going to die either. And I think they were afraid of it. But the thing is, if you do it earlier, you can raise the stakes more in the situations and maybe make you second guess that. Once he survives so much at the end of the second act, then you find it out, there's no way he's dying. It's still a chance, but it really doesn't seem likely. So for me, I think holding that off has the counter effect they intended, and actually makes it sure everybody's going to be okay at the end. But I think that if they had moved that around, I think that her not being able to speak was a bad decision. And I think, but especially not knowing the stakes until way too late, really affected the movie's ability to keep the audience engaged. They also have too many flashbacks with the daughter. I think they overdid that a bit to really connect you. And the movie's only 90 minutes long, and I feel like maybe a sixth of the movie, maybe 15, 20 minutes of the movie is him and his daughter. And like, I get it, you gotta see what's important about it, but then the fact that they didn't kill her off at the end of the second act, it's like, wow, you showed me all of that just to have her be already dead. It seems like a little like they overdid that part. So that's another thing. I think you draw that back a little bit, have a little more bonding with the new girl, since that's the one, the whole point of the movie is the universe gives him a second chance if he can survive to have another daughter. But I think that ultimately they did a good job with a lot of with breaking the basic story. They just made some critical decisions in terms of when they did certain things. The other thing about it is there are a couple goofy things, like I told you about earlier with the big 65 million years ago reveal. There are also some things where every time there's a bad situation, these are a couple of goofy things the movie did in addition to the main issue. They every time he's seen, they're like, oh, I'm not gonna make it. Somehow he sees a little girl, like maybe it's a picture falls out of his pocket and he sees her and he like gets stronger. Or at one point later in the movie, in the third act, the little girl realizing he's kind of, oh, he's not gonna make it. Man, what have you been doing? She gets like this hologram thing and projects a hologram to his daughter right into his face of her talking to him. It's a flashback to an earlier scene on the beach. And he's like, oh yeah, my daughter, give me strength. And then the funny thing is the Tyrannosaurus Rex, who he's running from, comes over and tries to bite the hologram girl's head off. Oh man, that's funny. As I said, the third act actually is pretty good. But the thing about him having to see his daughter to kind of kip him up is a little bit corny. But that moment is actually kind of corny, but also kind of funny. But of course, then he powers up, gets his rifle and he blasts like the Tyrannosaurus in the head, which is kind of cool. Like he just bucks that Tyrannosaurus. Of course, there's another dinosaur, so this difficulty isn't over. But he blasts Tyrannosaurus like, I mean, he just pops him. It's pretty ill. So as I said, the third act actually isn't that bad and kind of saves the movie from being a total waste. Because that third act hadn't smacked, I think that it'd probably be a 3 or a 2. It really, they had to kill it, but they did. And ultimately, as I said, the story with the daughter stuff, that's all pretty cool. So, that's my video. Thanks for stopping by. And, consider liking, subscribing. But thank you for watching. And please check back for more from Low Key Classic Movies.